Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be talking about the 2025 NFL free agency class. These are players that are subject to enter the market. We're going to be talking about whether you should re-sign them or cut them loose in your dynasty salary cap leagues.
Hike!
So for this episode, we're going to be talking about the most notable players. Now, there can be some players that are going to be added to this list down the road. We're going to be seeing some cap casualties. Those always happen. We just don't know who's going to get cut. And possibly you're going to see some trades too. So we're just going to be talking about the players that we know right now are going to be free agents. Obviously, we don't know whether they're going to re-sign with their teams or they'll end up hitting the market. So let's talk about the first guy, Joe. It's going to be probably the marquee guy of the list, wide receiver Tee Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals, formerly franchise tagged by the team, was not happy about it, thoughts of whether he would show up or not, ended up showing up, playing very well. There's been a lot of smoke, and sometimes there's fire, but, this idea, Burrow and everybody else in the organization wants to keep T, wants to keep Chase, but can the Bengals justify paying both Higgins and Jamar Chase all that money and have the wide receiver position be bloated if you think about their salary cap and how much they had allocated to the receiver? So if you have Tee Higgins in a dynasty salary cap league and you're asking yourself, what do I do? Which he is a free agent in our league, actually. What would you do with Tee Higgins here?
Yeah, he's a tough one because he carries a lot of injury risk, but when he's on the field, he's awesome. Still scores in the tops even despite the injuries. But I think if I knew he was going to be back with the Bengals, I would undoubtedly sign him. The tough part is
undoubtedly. Wow.
Yep, I would go ahead and sign him because I think just.
Well, you're a Tee Higgins guy. I
really like
you're
Tee Higgins, but I think it's just tough to know though. Part of the risky things is he does move on to a different team. Like, he has shown that he could be the one for a team, but it's still with the Bengals and Joe Burrow. And him and Chase just benefit from each other so much that I'd be a little bit concerned if he were to go to a different team that maybe he's not able to play opposite of an alpha wide receiver like a Jamar Chase. So like I said, if I knew for sure he was going to be back with the Bengals, I'd definitely resign him. I think in this scenario that he doesn't, I would let him hit the market and let somebody else pay up for Tee Higgins. And I would kind of hedge my bet against him not being able to perform as well outside of the Cincinnati Bengal offense.
This is purely a defensive move for me. I let him hit the market, and I'm not involved in negotiations to be able to bring him back. I think that he's the type of player that if you allow him to hit the market in your league, again, depends on how you're structured inside cap leagues. They are vastly different across the board. But he's a guy who probably someone's going to spend quite a bit of money to get this guy. And I'm with you. If he's not in Cincinnati, I don't think I want him, to be honest. I think he's really benefited from Joe Burrow as his quarterback, that offense, having Jamar Chase. If he goes and gets a lot of money and goes to a team that has the money, maybe he goes to the Jaguars or maybe he goes to, the Raiders or something like that. I don't think he'll be as successful. So I don't really have a lot of interest in Tee Higgins.
Yeah, it's tough. I just, you think about some of the teams that have a large amount of money at cap space that could just throw the money at Tee Higgins. Aren't in the best offensive situations with quarterbacks. So, unless maybe it's, him being able to play, with the Chicago Bears and like Caleb Williams and he gets to play out opposite of DJ Moore. I don't see them really making the deal. I just know they have a ton of cap space.
With the Roma Dunce there too, I don't see it. But I think at the end of the day, he'll be the belle of the ball. If he hits the market, unless there's a surprising player who gets released that we're not expecting right now, he is going to have multiple teams vying for him. And you got to remember, think about it from your standpoint. In our league, you're looking at the salary cap being the same as the NFL at $255. Do you want to be paying this guy $25 or $30 million a year for the next 4 or 5 years or 3 or 4 years? I don't know. That seems like a very risky proposition to me. I wouldn't want to pay that amount, especially the fact that he can't even stay in the field at times.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about back-to-back years where he's played at 12 games. So, 24 games over the last 2 years, even though That's the tough part is he missed 5 games this year, and yet he's still the wide receiver 17.
I get that, but I just saying it's a lot. This is where the salary cap piece comes in. It's not just
Yeah,
like in a normal dynasty league. If you have him in a normal dynasty league, you get to have him, great. But how's that contract going to look? Let's say you sign him to a 4 or 5 year deal 2 or 3 years from now. He's 25, 30 million a year. You're going to be happy with that? Or you're going to be like, man, how can I get this guy off my roster and nobody's going to want him?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's why I'm saying if he doesn't go back with Cincinnati, I would happily let somebody, buy the name value of Tee Higgins. But if he was in Cincinnati, I would sign him, though.
Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash that like button, and hit the notification bell for upcoming videos. We do videos throughout the year, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. So the next player we're going to be talking about here is wide receiver Chris Godwin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Joe, he was on a tear last season, even in those first 2 games, already amassing 5 touchdowns. Obviously, unfortunately, he had that ankle injury, took him out for the rest of the year. Question is now, where does he go? Rumor has it, and it's not like I have any inside sources or anything, but just based on what I've seen in the Xverse,
Twitter sphere,
whatever you want to call it, it seems like the Buccaneers have confidence that he'll be coming back to Tampa Bay. That's what I've seen, and I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, he was drafted in Tampa Bay. And so it would make a lot of sense for Godwin maybe to run and retire a buck and stay there with the team. So what are your thoughts on Chris Godwin, Joe? I know you tend to like him. He's had 2 major injuries that have caused him to miss time. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would, if he's back with the Buccaneers, like you're saying, like you're reading, I would go ahead and re-sign Chris Godwin. I mean, talking about he played 7 games, had the 5 touchdowns. He was the wide receiver 2 on the season before that ankle injury. And, I think just that familiarity of being in being there with Baker Mayfield in the Bucs offense, and it really seems like they unlock something in him by putting him in that slot position. That's where he was absolutely eating there. So I would have full confidence in re-signing him if he stays a Buccaneer.
He's another guy I think I let at the market. He'll be 29 years old in February. He's had 2 pretty significant injuries. And it's honestly, this is kind of a tangent, but it's pretty remarkable what Baker Mayfield's done in his career. He's literally had a different offensive coordinator every single season that he's played in the NFL. That's incredible. A lot of guys can't make it past 1 or 2 changes, let alone like 8 that he's had. But
Right.
How does the offense look? Is it the same offense? Liam Cohen came in. Liam Cohen seemed like it took the offense to the next level. Obviously, he had that kind of snafu with them, and now he's in Jacksonville as the head coach. I just think, again, a guy who hasn't been able to stay healthy as much, and you're talking about, I got to pay this guy probably 15, 20 million probably to acquire to really sign him if I'm going to be, trying to make a power play and try to beat all the other suitors for him. I just, I don't know. It just seems like a lot of money. And I'm thinking in that if you sign him if you were going to sign him, I'd recommend a short-term deal. I'll tell you that right now.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
I'd pay more money to do like a 2-year deal. I wouldn't want to touch a 3, 4, 5-year deal. That would be insane to me.
No, yeah, that would be insane. I mean, you're talking about he's going to be turning 29 on February 27th here. And, it would be crazy to give him, more than a 3-year deal just because we see, wide receivers, once they get above the age of 30, becomes iffy and the injury concern goes up even higher.
But you recognize, like you can say, because we're just talking about it, you don't have to put your money where your mouth is in this scenario. But you know good as well as I do, when you're in the midst of free agency and you're bidding on players, sometimes you have to go into uncharted waters that you don't really want to go to in order to
re-sign them. And that's why I'd be willing to take the discounts to keep these guys on my team rather than having to go ahead and bid on them in free agency. Because yes,
now what about in free agency though? If he's a free agent, do you still sign him? Let's say I own him. I let him hit the market. He's now in the market. would you go after and sign him, or you're saying I'd be interested in him if I had the ability to re-sign him and he's on my team, but I don't know if I would go after him and sign him in free
Right.
agency.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the question of the video is whether or not you're going to re-sign him or let him hit the market. So, frankly, your other situation is kind of outside of the realm here. But yeah, I don't
Boo.
he as inclined to spend up for him in free agency just because of how much money he would probably cost. And like you're saying, like Tee Higgins, Chris Godwin, you're buying the name value in free agency. I'd rather possibly see if I can't grab some intriguing names at a lesser price, possibly.
Next player we're going to be talking about here is running back J.K. Dobbins of the LA Chargers. Had a resurgent year going to the Chargers from Baltimore, reuniting with Greg Roman and that offensive style that Dobbins is accustomed to back in his days in Baltimore. He's had a very interesting career, Joe. Obviously, when he has two legs, he plays much better than when he has one leg. What are your thoughts on J.K. Dobbins here? This is a tough one because honestly, in this thought exercise here, you're saying to resign him, but we don't know where he's going to be. So if he stays with the Chargers, then it's one thing. But if he goes out in the open market with this draft class that we've been talking about for running backs, how does that factor into your decision?
Yeah, in fact, there's a lot. That's why I wouldn't be re-signing J.K. Dobbins, because I think he just happened to land in the perfect fit with the Chargers. And I mean, the caveat would be if he goes back to the Chargers. I don't see the Chargers doing that just because, like you mentioned, the how stacked the draft class is, and you know, Jim Harbaugh, Craig Romans could get their pick of their guy that they would potentially want, and it's a pretty deep running back class. They don't necessarily have to grab one in the first round of the draft either. And then it's just I think J.K. Dobbins, he would be stuck in a system where he couldn't just get the majority of the touches if he goes somewhere else, and that's why I'd be out on him. I mean, he was able to actually play 13 games this year, which was pretty impressive with all the injuries he had. He was able to get 195 carries. He did have 4.6 yard per carry average, 9 touchdowns as well. I think that production was largely just because of the structure of the Chargers offense, and I think it'd be tough for him to repeat that going elsewhere.
I think of all the guys we've talked about so far, I think I feel the most strongly that I would definitely let him hit the market. I think sometimes, especially in a dynasty salary cap league, we're not used to the idea of looking at what their NFL contract is, because you could say, well, what does it really matter? My contract is different, so I don't really have to pay attention to what the league is. But I actually would recommend you do, because I do think it can tell you some stories. And what I'm kind of bringing attention to is the fact that J.K. Dobbins signed a 1-year prove-it deal with the Chargers for $1.6 million, which is basically nothing, next to nothing. He signed late in free agency. He had a ton of different teams that he could go to. No one wanted him. I think he had a visit with the Chiefs, if I'm not mistaken. Ended up not signing there. That was later in free agency. Then he went to the Chargers, but you got to remember, it's a people business, just like in the real world. He knew Greg Roman. They knew the staff. There was familiarity there. There was comfort there. They didn't really have a running back. So it made sense. It's like, okay, bring him on board. And he had a great year. But now the Chargers, J.K. Dobbins going to want to get paid. He had I believe he's a second-round pick. Didn't get paid all that much during his time in Baltimore. Signed a 1-year prove-it deal to do really well. Now he's hoping to go into the market and get money. Does he going to get it? I don't know. I don't think so, because again, the running back class doesn't help him any. But why would the Chargers be motivated to bring him back? I mean, you did see Baltimore bring the likes of Gus Edwards back time and time again. So could say that the Chargers do, but I would think that the Chargers, even if they do bring him back, if I'd have him and I sign him, I'd try to trade him immediately, because by the time the draft comes around, I wouldn't be shocked if they drafted another running back. And now you're talking about a very congested backfield. And J.K. Dobbins has never been much of a receiving threat. So he's mostly just going to be running on first and second down. I would want nothing to do with J.K. Dobbins. I think I would definitely let him hit the market.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And there's no doubt that, the Baltimore the Chargers will end up drafting a running back here. just especially because Kimani Vidal didn't really look as good as people were thinking too as well. So I think honestly, I think it would be in J.K. Dobbins' best interest to go back with the Chargers, stay with
Agreed.
that familiarity of the Greg Roman system, even if it is a little bit less money. Just because with this draft class, I just don't see like teams just throwing bags of money at him.
No, me neither. He would be the best for the situation,
But
but I would
yeah,
be
I think
shocked.
you don't give J.K. Dobbins enough credit as a receiver. I mean, he did
Mm,
have 38 targets and 32 receptions. Like he is a capable receiver, just but he's always in the Ravens, some form of the Ravens system that also just doesn't pass a ton, and they like to run a lot.
I guess. I mean, but if you look at the rest of his career before that, it was non-existent. So yes, I guess he proved the fact that he could do it somewhat, but I wouldn't say he is lethal by any means in that
I'm not saying
category.
that. I'm just saying he's more capable than what you're making it out to sound like. You're making him sound like he's Gus Edwards and like won't catch the ball at all.
Okay, fair enough. But okay, I'll give you that one. But ultimately, regardless of that, to me, it's fool's gold. I wouldn't touch it.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, I would, unless it got to the point where he goes back to the Chargers and he gets to a decent price where people aren't, in your leagues, if people aren't going crazy for him, he could be a decent depth piece, a potential dart throw again.
So the next player we're going to be talking about here is more relevant in super flex leagues, or if you're in a deep league like ours, which is a 16-team league. That's quarterback Sam Darnold, formerly of the Minnesota Vikings. We expect I don't think that he'll be coming back there. I think they're going to go with the J.J. McCarthy experience. And, it was a really rough go the past, really 2 games to the Vikings and Sam Darnold. Maybe start seeing those ghosts again. Who knows? But he just was not looking like the same quarterback that had the composure that we had seen him have during the course of the year. Honestly, the wheels just fell off the wagon here. So
don't put that all on Sam Darnold.
Okay, but still, it may or may not have been, but the public opinion has already been kind of created. And
Right,
most
sure.
people will tell you that he lost a ton of money in those last 2 games. Now, who knows? We don't know, right?
Sure.
It's all conjecture, right? I mean, we're going to find out in like a month, in a few weeks, like a week or two, and there's quarterback needy teams out there. So you could very well see him getting a pretty sizable contract once he hits the market. So what's your stand? It sounds like based on what you're saying, you might be leaning towards resigning Sam Darnold here.
No, I wouldn't resign Sam Darnold. Are you kidding me? And the only way I'd want him is if Kevin O'Connell's going to be coaching him up. I mean, he seems to be the absolute quarterback whisperer. Just doesn't matter who he puts back there. They put up solid numbers. I was just saying, as far as like him seeing ghosts and stuff, Kevin O'Connell actually did him no favors in those last couple of games and didn't change up the game plan. He stuck to. I mean, Sam Darnold was getting sacked and everything because he's got to hold on to the ball because all these routes were down the 15 yards down the field, all these deep routes. It made no sense. It didn't work against the Lions. They literally ran out the same game plan, and the Rams were able to take advantage and just blitzed them. And they didn't have any hot routes or shorter passes. So he didn't really have any options. That's what I was saying. Kevin O'Connell, for as great as a coach he is, didn't really do him any favors in the last couple of games. But that being said, I'm nervous about Sam Darnold. I've never been that high on Sam Darnold. I think he's an okay quarterback, and I think just because he was in that system, was able to throw to guys like Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson, also elevates your game. So I wouldn't be looking to re-sign him, and I'd let somebody else in a super flex league go ahead and chase the stats and chase Sam Darnold.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, he's more. I mean, he's a pocket passer, has real no running upside. I think the best that he is for you is a quarterback too. I think he's a nice backup to have in case of a bye week fill in, or maybe you have an injury that can kind of skate you by for a few weeks. I don't think paying this guy a lot of money makes any sense at all. I am with you on this. I would let him hit the market.
Yeah, I mean, he did have, in terms of his rushing stats, he had a career high this year with the amount of times he ran. Not so much the yardage part, but 67 times he ran the ball, which is the most in his career.
And for how many yards?
212. So.
Okay, so nothing.
Yeah,
It's not
like
nothing. It's not nothing, but it's not. I guess I'm using the word nothing, but to me, it's inconsequential for you being able to have him be able to
yeah, he's not
have
the
that
dual
rushing
threat.
floor to be able to help you to get, those extra points. Why people get so excited about Jaden Daniels and Lamar Jackson, so on and so
Right.
forth, because they've got that rushing floor. He doesn't have it.
Yeah, well, it's just funny because everyone always said he was like had that underrated athleticism and his ability to run, but yeah, he doesn't seem to really utilize it. That's when I think he's capable. He just doesn't utilize it, which obviously, to your point, he's not viewed as like one of those dual threat guys that is going to give you all those rushing yards.
So next player we're going to be talking about here is wide receiver Stefon Diggs of the Houston Texans. Now he tore his ACL, and he's going to be rehabbing that. And I think he's going to be, 31 years old heading into the season. So we don't know where he's going to go. Does he go back to Houston? Does he go somewhere else? He's kind of a wild card. I don't know where would he go to Dallas to reunite with his, not really reunite, but to play with his brother. What are your thoughts on Stefon Diggs here?
Yeah, I mean, I think Dallas could make some sense. Um, I I wouldn't re-sign him just because I don't know where he is, but he's somebody like I might be willing to go ahead and sign in free agency because I don't think he's going to garner as much money as the top guys that we talked about, at Chris Godwin or Tee Higgins. I think people are going to be off of Stefon Diggs, where I might be able to take a chance on him because he actually looked decent with the Texans. Like I honestly thought he was going to be kind of irrelevant there. Thought Tank Dell was the true number 2, but he was really not doing bad before that ACL injury. I mean, he had 64 targets, had 47 receptions, 496 yards, and 3 touchdowns as well. And that's 10.6 yards average per reception there as well. So I think he's still got a little bit of juice left. It just depends on where he goes.
Yeah, I don't think I'd re-sign him either, but I agree with you that I would put some feelers out there in the free agency market. And we don't know where he's going to go. Dallas would actually be a really interesting landing spot because they don't really have a second receiver. So I could definitely see him going there. And I think that could benefit him. It's just too hard to know right now. And I think at the end of the day, I'm okay losing him if someone pays a ton of money for him, because
Right.
I think the days of what he was in Buffalo are gone. Like, I don't think we're going to see him as this top echelon receiver. I think he can be a solid wide receiver 2. I don't think he has that upside to be a wide receiver 1 anymore.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He's definitely a wide receiver 2. Just interesting though, with 9 more games, I mean, there's a chance he could have had 1,000-yard season.
He probably would have, I think.
Yeah.
He was pretty involved. He could have had a decent amount of touchdowns because they were looking into his way quite a bit in the red zone. I think him and Stroud had a pretty good connection. Remember, the Texans had him on a longer term deal. They did this wacky negotiation where it basically took off those remaining years and just made a 1-year deal. I mean, it's almost unheard of. I can't remember the last time that's happened as I followed, the National Football League. I just haven't seen it. So
Well, that's because everybody knows 1 year Stefon Diggs in your locker room's okay. After 1 year, it becomes a problem.
Yeah. Well, either way, I think Stefon Diggs wanted that too. I don't think it was a mutual decision that the team.
Sure.
We didn't know. I don't know. Maybe they did talk about it. I can't remember. And even if they did, who knows what's true and what's false. So whether the team initiated it, whether Stefon Diggs initiated, whether it was a mutual thing, I don't know. But it'll be really interesting and very telling to see, is he even considering Houston, or is he just like, I'm out of here?
Yeah. I mean, Houston could use him though, because they're saying Tank Dell's not going to be ready for this year. So they could definitely use Stefon Diggs back. And with the change in offensive philosophy, that could bode well for him too.
Well, last player we're going to be talking about here is wide receiver Amari Cooper of the Buffalo Bills. The Bills traded, I believe it was like a 3rd-round pick to acquire Amari Cooper, which was quite a bit at the time. I think a lot of people felt like that might have been a decent haul for the Browns to be able to get that amount of draft capital for him when you saw DeAndre Hopkins go, I think, for like a 5th-round pick. So when it comes to Amari Cooper, I would say it was a disappointment as far as his production in Buffalo. He's obviously model citizen, team player, kind of embodied, I don't say embodied, but I mean, I guess he did. He joined in on the everybody eats mentality. He was not saying I wanted the ball or demanded the ball by any means. So, Joe, what are your thoughts on Amari Cooper? He'll be a free agent. Don't know if he'll end up coming back to Buffalo or if he'll be going somewhere else. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I really hope for his sake he doesn't go back to Buffalo. I just feel like they don't have any clue on how to utilize him, and their like you said, their philosophy is an absolute nightmare for fantasy because you never know who it's going to be. They pass the ball around so much. And it's pretty much if you don't have, Josh Allen or James Cook, you're disappointed in the Bills' offense. So I hope he goes elsewhere. I mean, if I had him, I wouldn't be looking to resign him. I wonder how much of it is just the lack of the Bills' ability to utilize him, or just is it a point where does Amari Cooper just not have that much left to give at this point? I know he's only, I mean, he's 30, he's going to be 31 by the time this season rolls around. So, he had, it's interesting, in 6 games with the Browns, he had 53 targets, 24 catches for 250. With the Bills in 8 games, he had 32 targets, 20 receptions for 297 yards, had 2 touchdowns, both with the Browns and the Bills as well. So, I don't know. I would much rather have Stefon Diggs in terms of if I was going to chase somebody in free agency than Amari Cooper.
I don't think it's as dire as you're making it out to be if he were to go back with the Bills. My reason for saying that,
It's not.
No, I don't think so. My reason for saying that is
he's not even. You're talking about getting 4 targets a game.
Look, I get the stats. What I'm saying is, in hearing what Brandon Beane, the general manager, has said, when you trade somebody in the middle of the season, having them acclimate to your playbook is not necessarily the easiest thing. He's never been in Joe Brady's offense, for number one. Number two,
maybe you should think about that before you throw a 3rd-round pick at somebody. Maybe you should have a plan.
Well, that's a different story. Number two, you don't know though if the player can acclimate or not, but regardless. Number two, he had a significant wrist injury that, in all intents and purposes, the medical staff told him he should get surgery done. And he said, no, I want to keep playing.
Yeah, but that doesn't affect your ability to move. The Bills tried to use him in a screen pass, and I was like, what are they doing?
Well, that was just an audible because they saw it was a zero blitz, and they had to come up with something, and he's on the edge. But regardless, I think if Amari Cooper were to come back with Buffalo, I don't think – will it be the Amari Cooper that we've come to know? Or these past years, probably not, unless they have a complete change in philosophy. But I do think he could be better than what he was. I just think that there were a few things going against him. I think he probably would be better off going to a more friendly place as far as a receiver goes, because there could be an argument to be made that maybe the Joe Brady system, he just doesn't know how to use a strong X receiver. I mean, Stefon Diggs kind of disappeared.
Well, it's just because they're just a run first offense, and it just affects the wide receivers. And then they're not a team that hyper targets a wide receiver 1. It's just who's ever open gets the opportunities.
I get that, but I mean, even beyond that, though, I mean, there's still teams that run the ball, but like even Baltimore. But Zay Flowers is relevant; he still gets they don't
have any other receivers. But they hyper target him. They put him in the correct situation.
That's what I'm saying. You don't hyper target. He's not getting those hyper targets.
Right, because it's everybody eats. Baltimore's not like that. That's the Joe Brady philosophy, but it's obviously working for the actual NFL and the Bills. They don't turn the ball over anymore. It's not forcing Josh Allen to play hero ball. So, and he's not, throwing all those interceptions that he was. So I think it makes sense for the Bills, but that's why I think it's an absolute fantasy nightmare for any wide receiver that's going to go to Buffalo because they don't know how to utilize those guys. And that's why I would say, like, if Amari Cooper's back in Buffalo, I do not want to touch that guy at all, even though I'm honestly not that interested in Amari Cooper no matter where he goes.
Believe it or not, of all the players, he'd probably be the one I'm most likely to re-sign. Because I think that I could re-sign him. Joe, he had a bad year, so that makes him a lot cheaper. I don't have to pay $20, $25, $30 million for one of these players. I don't have to.
You're going to get what you pay for.
with possible upside.
I don't know how much upside anymore.
Well, that's to be debated.
And he's talking about a guy. I mean, yes, the thing of it is, like, he's always got some sort of injury. He just usually plays through it, but I still think it affects his production.
So that does it for this episode. We talked about some of the most notable free agents that are going to be hitting the market potentially, right, in the next month or so. And we talked about whether we would re-sign them or we would cut them loose. So if you're in a Dynasty Salary Cap League, you probably are thinking about those decisions as well. So hopefully you found this helpful. In the next episode, we're going to be talking about some players who received extensions and what should you do about those players. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.